Rektarn crouched behind the shattered remains of what had once been the Grand Plaza of Akran 4, his multi-limbed silhouette cutting a jagged line against the dim orange sky. Smoke curled upward from the city's core, and the distant moans of the dying carried across the cracked streets like a macabre symphony. His armored exoskeleton felt heavy, almost unbearably so as he adjusted the control on his plasma rifle, though it hardly mattered anymore. The planet was lost. Every sensor screamed the same truth. Defeat was inevitable. In the distance, the borders of the colony burned under relentless orbital bombardment. Each strike illuminated the jagged skyline, revealing bodies strewn across the pavement, alien citizens whose screams had faded into silence. Rektarn's antenna twitched involuntarily, a subtle sign of stress among his kind, a creature tuned to danger with every nerve. He had fought for decades, engineered defenses, and led campaigns with precise military calculation, but here, with humanity poised to take the stage in his thoughts, he felt helpless. He had once been proud of his race's ingenuity. Akran I-4 had flourished under his leadership, a jewel of the Outer Rim, crystalline towers, gravity-tuned transport lanes, and minds honed for strategy that surpassed most enemies. Yet even brilliance falters when confronted with numbers and ferocity, without precedent. Rektarn inhaled sharply through his respiratory vents. His sensors picked up the vibration of engines approaching in the high atmosphere. Orbital bombardment, unrelenting, inescapable. He could surrender. He could end the misery of his people with the simple decision to lay down arms. But his mind hesitated. Even as despair clawed at him, a single thought anchored him. If someone could intervene. If someone dared. The vibrations on the ground grew stronger. Not the usual quakes of bombardment, but something different. He squinted into the dim haze. Sensors flickered with anomalies. Signatures that didn't match anything in his extensive galactic database. Unknown vessels descending at hypersonic speed. Small pod-like craft each humming with a quiet intensity. Rektarn's antennae froze in confusion. They can't be, he whispered to no one. No one answered. Only the wind, carrying the smell of scorched stone and burning fuel, responded. The pods slammed into the city's outskirts, creating silent craters. Dust and debris hung in the air, masking the descent of figures from within. Humans. Barely armored, armed with nothing more than rifles and grit, they emerged from the smoke like shadows, deliberate and precise. Their movements were unsettlingly coordinated yet eerily silent. No one else would have survived such an entry. No one else, that is, except humans. Rektarn felt a shiver run through his nervous system. He had read about humans in intelligence briefings, relentless, adaptive, and utterly fearless in the face of annihilation. Yet he had never witnessed them in person, never imagined the tangible presence of their audacity. They didn't cower beneath firestorms or scramble for cover. They moved through ruin as if the chaos itself obeyed their will. One human, helmetless, exposed to the acrid clouds, looked directly at him. The gaze held no fear, no hesitation, only a calm, unwavering defiance that seemed to pierce through the lingering haze of despair. Rektarn couldn't read it fully. Their expressions were so alien to his perception of threat and emotion, yet something stirred within him, a strange mix of awe and unease. The ground beneath him trembled again, not from weapons, but from purpose. The humans advanced. They cleared squads of Rektarn's remaining defenders as if preordained, moving with a precision that outstripped even the most disciplined Akran battalions. Each encounter was swift and decisive, each shot perfectly calculated. Yet it wasn't merely skill, it was will. The humans weren't fighting with technology alone. They were fighting with something deeper, something alive, a determination to persist, to carve victory out of impossibility. Rektarn retreated further, incongruously grateful for the crumbling debris that gave him cover. He could see the tide changing before his eyes, his meticulously laid plans unraveling in real time. But he was not angry. He was fascinated. How could such small beings unleash such chaos and order in tandem? A shadow fell across him. One human soldier standing tall amidst the ruins raised a hand, not in attack but in gesture. Their voice came calm yet resonant, carrying an authority that Rektarn couldn't define. "You don't have to fight alone anymore," the human said, almost as if speaking to the wind itself. And in that moment, with smoke choking the horizon and the sun barely a smoldering orange disk, Rektarn felt an alien version of hope, a foreign pulse in his veins. The humans had arrived, not with fanfare or boasting, but with the quiet, inexorable promise of intervention somewhere. High above in the silent void between stars, Rektarn couldn't shake the feeling that something greater had orchestrated this. A subtle hand weaving through chaos, guiding what seemed impossible toward survival. He didn't know if it was luck or something more, something ineffable. The first of the human squads melted into the ruined streets, taking positions with terrifying precision. And just like that, the narrative of his colony, once destined for extinction, shifted. Rektarn swallowed, antennae trembling with anticipation, fear, and wonder. The humans were here, and somewhere, deep in the fabric of the universe, it felt as if the story of Akron 4 had just begun to rewrite itself. The humans moved like phantoms through Akron IF's ruined streets, their boots barely stirring the dust. Smoke clung to their silhouettes, curling around them like an invisible cloak, yet nothing about their presence suggested hesitation. Rektarn watched from a crumbled observation deck, heart pounding in a rhythm unfamiliar to his kind. The humans were precise, but more than that, they were deliberate, aware, and terrifyingly calm. He had trained his soldiers to respond to threats with immediacy, to predict movement before it happened. Yet these creatures, these humans, defied prediction. Each step was measured, each breath a silent affirmation of their purpose. Rektarn's sensors tracked their motion. But even with all the computational power of his mind and the augmented analytical software embedded in his neural cortex, he couldn't anticipate their next move. They were chaos and order, entwined in a way that made his circuits hum with unease. The first human squad reached the heart of the city, where the remnants of the central hub burned like a monument to defeat. They paused, spread out, and Rektarn noticed something curious. They weren't scanning only for combatants. They were scanning for survivors. Every corridor, every shattered building, every hollowed-out shell of life was a potential human life to save, or a threat to neutralize. Even in destruction, they moved with empathy. Is this mercy? He whispered to himself, antennae quivering. He had no precedent for such behavior in warfare. Even his most disciplined officers had been trained to treat survival and compassion as mutually exclusive. Yet humans embodied both simultaneously, wielding empathy as effectively as a weapon. A young human, barely more than a boy by Terran reckoning, knelt beside a collapsed structure. Dust fell from the ceiling, but he ignored it, using a compact scanning device to check for life. Moments later, he pulled free a wounded child, eyes wide with terror, and the boy barely noticed the human's presence. His survival instinct tethered to hope, to a faith in something greater. The human carried him as if he weighed nothing at all, a paradox of vulnerability and strength. Rektarn felt a pang of admiration, envy. It was difficult to parse. The humans didn't possess the overwhelming size, the crystalline armor, or the psionic resonance of his kind. Yet they exuded a presence that altered the battlefield, not through dominance but through intent. The alien commander realized with a gnawing dread that he was witnessing a philosophy of war unknown to his species. Fight, yes, but protect and create simultaneously. Suddenly, his sensors lit up. A movement, a coordinated sweep of his remaining troops attempting to flank the humans. They had been silent, undetected until now, but the humans anticipated it. One hand signal and a volley of disciplined fire erupted from concealed positions. Bolts of energy cut through the air, precise and lethal, yet executed with an eerie restraint. Rektarn watched in disbelief as the ambush was neutralized before it truly began. Not a single human fell. He felt a shiver of internal conflict. If I attack them, I may doom my own soldiers. But if I retreat? The thought stalled. Retreating now could mean survival, but at what cost? Watching humans operate instilled a strange hope that he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years, and yet he was still commander. The weight of his people's lives pressed upon him, gnawing at his resolve. He climbed down from his vantage, careful, deliberate. For the first time in decades, he felt the weight of uncertainty, the unfamiliar sense that a force greater than strategy, greater than planning, might dictate the outcome of battle. Was this luck, or some unseen guiding hand? The humans pressed on, entering the hub's command center. Dust hung thick, screens shattered, and sparks danced across exposed circuits. The sight would have been terrifying had anyone else attempted it. But the humans moved with intention, clearing corridors, securing key points, and coordinating silently with gestures and nods. Their confidence radiated an unspoken message. Nothing can stop us. Rektarn's mind raced. His orders had been absolute, final, surrender. Yet watching the humans, so small, so vulnerable, yet inexorably turning the tide, he began to question the very essence of command, of certainty, of fate. Perhaps there was more to survival than logic, more to victory than power. Perhaps determination itself could bend reality. Then a sudden movement on the upper floors. A collapsed beam threatened to crush a pair of human soldiers. In an instant, one of their squad mates lunged, catching the falling debris with a makeshift lever and guiding it away with nothing but raw strength and instinct. The impact would have shattered the bones of any Akran, but these humans absorbed the danger, laughed, and continued. Rektarn's sensors picked up a spike in his neural pathways, emotion, something alien and foreign, something he hadn't felt since the early campaigns of his youth. Hope, faith, a subtle, quiet reverence for the sheer audacity of life clinging to life. The humans embodied both defiance and grace in ways he could barely comprehend. He took a step back, antennae brushing against the smoke-filled air. Somewhere deep within he felt the stirring of belief, a sensation that surpassed logic, beyond programming, beyond the battlefield. Perhaps there was a reason the humans arrived when they did. Perhaps the universe itself had tilted toward them. From the shadowed corridors a human paused, removing a small device from his pack. He whispered something, a word too quiet for Rektarn to decipher. Yet the vibrations of that whisper seemed to ripple across the room, settling like calm rain over chaos. The human pressed a button, and a soft, almost imperceptible pulse radiated outward. A signal, a prayer or a call. Rektarn's internal systems, trained to interpret, analyze, and strategize, failed to assign it meaning. It wasn't technology he was witnessing. It was something far older, far more profound. The human will asserting itself in the presence of doom, guided by a force he could not name. The city outside groaned under the bombardment, but inside the hub time seemed to stretch. The humans moved with uncanny synergy, clearing debris, tending to the wounded, and preparing for the next assault as if they were not only soldiers but shepherds of destiny. Rektarn finally spoke aloud, voice thick with the strange emotion of awe and confusion. They are not just fighters. A flicker of motion caught his eye. Another squad emerging from the smoke, this one moving toward a collapsed civilian sector. His mind raced. If they succeed, if they endure, the story of Akran Thafur may not end in death. And then, amidst the chaos, a single human looked up at the shattered ceiling, eyes glinting with resolve. He raised his hand, not to strike, but in silent reverence, whispering words lost in translation. A prayer, a plea, a defiance. Rektarn shivered, unsure if it was fear or enlightenment coursing through him. These creatures, these humans, they do not merely survive. They impose meaning upon survival itself. The ground quaked again, but this time not with destruction alone. It was the rhythm of possibility, the pulse of human determination echoing through the bones of a dying world. The first wave of human squads had vanished into the labyrinth of Akran Rafur's ruined districts, leaving Rektarn with a gnawing unease he couldn't quell. His troops, those who had not yet fled or been incinerated by orbital fire, regrouped in the shattered courtyards, their antennae quivering with nervous energy. They had fought countless wars, but the humans, those unpredictable, relentless predators, defied every expectation. "Commander," hissed one officer, scales gleaming under the blood-orange sky. They are not ordinary. Every movement they anticipate." Rektarn didn't answer immediately. He observed the humans from a rooftop, silhouetted against the smoke. They weren't moving recklessly. They weren't driven by fear, anger, or desperation in the way his species had come to expect from defenders. They were calm, methodical, terrifyingly adaptable. A lone human emerged from a side street carrying what looked like a bundle of improvised tools. He approached a collapsed bridge, paused, and then began dismantling debris, using leverage and mechanical intuition that defied Rektarn's understanding of physics. His hands moved with fluidity and purpose, each motion precise, almost ritualistic. Within moments, a narrow passageway opened, Another human slipped through, then another. Rektarn's chest constricted. The humans were not merely soldiers, they were problem solvers, survivors who imposed order on chaos itself. In a way, they wielded ingenuity as a weapon as deadly as any rifle. He gave the order. His elite guard, shimmering in reflective armor and armed with concentrated plasma disruptors, surged forward. This would be the moment to crush the interlopers, to reclaim dominance. His mind raced through every possible strategy: encircle, bombard, divide. Yet as the first beams of his weapons flared, he realized he had underestimated them. The humans did not scatter. They did not panic. They adapted. With almost preternatural anticipation, they dove for cover, rolled through rubble, and emerged in new positions. One soldier lobbed a compact explosive that detonated with pinpoint accuracy, disabling a squad of Rektarn's veterans without a single human casualty. Rektarn froze, antennae twitching in disbelief. How do they do this? The algorithms of war embedded in his brain, honed over decades of campaigns, failed to account for such fluid unpredictability. The humans weren't following patterns. They were improvising at the speed of thought, seeing openings in chaos that no tactical system could predict. A human with a rifle the size of a child's torso appeared atop a fractured wall. He fired once, then again. The shots were precise, suppressive, and strangely rhythmic, forcing Rektarn's soldiers to retreat behind whatever cover remained. The humans moved as though the battlefield itself bent around them. And through it all there was no malice, no hatred, only purpose. Rektarn's mind, usually a furnace of calculation, was now a storm of doubt. He realized something unsettling. The humans didn't just fight, they reshaped reality. Every obstacle became a tool, every limitation a challenge to be overcome. And somehow, somewhere in the silence between explosions, there was faith guiding them. Not religion as he understood it, but a quiet, unshakable belief in possibility itself. He barked orders again, more desperately this time. Elite squads surged, attempting to flank, to crush the humans in a pincer. Yet the humans responded with astonishing foresight. One team, moving through the ruins, triggered a series of small detonations, collapsing the path behind them and cutting off his force's advance. Another squad laid down suppressive fire from rooftops, herding his soldiers into positions where the humans could strike with devastating efficiency. And then, in a narrow alleyway, he saw it. Human ingenuity on a level that defied military logic. A group of them had rigged a scavenged drone, attaching a small plasma disruptor to it. With a precise command, the drone darted into the midst of his encircling soldiers, detonating with a concussive shockwave that toppled the armored elite like dominoes. Rektarn staggered back. The battlefield, once under his complete control, now writhed with unpredictability. Every tactic he had perfected was being turned against him, not with overwhelming force alone, but with strategy, empathy, and ingenuity. A subtle sound caught his attention, the soft murmur of human coordination, barely audible over the chaos. Not orders shouted, not signals blared, but communication of a kind he had never heard. Quiet, deliberate, and resonant with trust. Each human acted as though guided by an unseen thread, yet without losing individuality. For the first time in his life, Rektarn felt the full weight of vulnerability. He had always believed in strength, in control, in the inviolable precision of command. Yet here were humans, small and fragile by any comparative measure, rewriting the rules of engagement simply by refusing to follow them. He remembered the whispers of his advisors, the intelligence briefings that called humans unpredictable, chaotic, even suicidal in their tactics. He had dismissed them, confident in the superiority of his own race. Now faced with reality, he understood. Human unpredictability was not recklessness, it was clarity. They saw paths through chaos that no one else could perceive. In the midst of the skirmish, a young human soldier, helmet glinting in the fiery haze, paused. He looked skyward, raising one hand in quiet reverence. Rektarn couldn't hear the words, but the gesture struck him profoundly. This small, fragile being, surrounded by death and ruin, was praying not for vengeance, not for power, but for guidance, for courage, for survival. Rektarn's internal systems, built for analysis, calculation, and prediction, faltered. He couldn't categorize it, couldn't reduce it to strategy. It was something greater, something beyond logic. He felt it in his chest, a strange resonance that mirrored awe, fear, and respect all at once. His soldiers faltered, hesitation spreading like a contagion. The humans were not just fighting, they were creating. Every movement, every decision, every moment of courage altered the flow of the battle. And for the first time, Rektarn questioned whether victory was even possible for his kind. The ground shook again, a subtle vibration this time, almost like the pulse of life itself. Somewhere deep in the universe, it felt as if a force unseen had chosen a side not for humans alone, but for the audacity of hope, the stubbornness of life, and the courage to endure. Rektarn raised his voice, shouting commands that would have once moved mountains, yet now barely registered over the tide of human ingenuity. His soldiers turned, hesitated, then fell back, not defeated by strength alone, but by the unyielding force of human will. And in that moment, amidst fire, ash, and the quiet murmur of unseen prayers, Rektarn realized the truth he had never admitted to himself. The humans were not just interlopers. They were a reckoning. They were the embodiment of possibility, and the story of HFY was no longer his to dictate. Rektarn staggered through the ruined corridors of what had once been the central hub. His armored exoskeleton bore scorch marks from human weaponry, minor injuries that his kind would shrug off, but the real wound was internal. His mind, always a bastion of strategy and calculation, teetered on the edge of disbelief. The humans had not merely survived, they had orchestrated the impossible. Each room he cleared revealed the same scene: humans navigating devastation with uncanny precision, tending to the wounded and disarming hazards that would have claimed entire squads of Akron soldiers. It was as if they possessed an innate understanding of chaos itself, bending it to their will rather than succumbing to it. One human approached a collapsed ceiling panel, small hands sliding into crevices, dismantling debris piece by piece. His movements were careful, deliberate, and unerring, almost meditative. Nearby, another soldier carried a wounded Akron civilian, cradling her with care while scanning for threats. Rektarn felt a strange sensation, an alien version of shame, as he realized that his species, trained for conquest and dominance, rarely considered mercy a tactic, let alone a strength. "Commander," hissed a subordinate, antennae trembling. They save lives even as they fight. They do not fear death." Rektarn didn't respond immediately. He watched a young human soldier crouch beneath a shattered doorway, rifle trained on an approaching patrol. There was no hesitation, no panic, only intent. The soldier's eyes flicked upward, briefly meeting the orange haze of the sky. Then, almost imperceptibly, he whispered something. A prayer, perhaps, or a vow, not luck. Someone wanted me to live. The thought resonated in Rektarn's chest. He had spent decades relying on calculation, on probability, on control. Yet here, in the ruins of his colony, he confronted something unquantifiable. Faith as a weapon, courage as strategy. The humans fought with an audacity that defied prediction, guided by a force he could neither name nor ignore. A sudden explosion rocked the building, throwing dust and shards into the air. Rektarn instinctively raised his shields, expecting devastation. But the humans were already ahead, their positions calculated with foresight that seemed preternatural. One soldier hurled a small device, a flash of energy erupting and neutralizing the threat before it could endanger anyone. Another dragged a trapped civilian to safety, moving with a speed that belied his small frame. Rektarn's mind reeled. His elite squads, trained for decades in tactics and psionic warfare, faltered against humans armed only with rifles, explosives, and ingenuity. Each encounter forced him to reconsider assumptions he had never questioned. Perhaps power alone does not dictate victory. Perhaps will, faith, and adaptability are the true forces of survival. He retreated to a vantage point, overlooking the city's devastated core. Smoke and fire danced in a grotesque ballet. Yet amidst the chaos, the humans moved with clarity. They did not fight blindly. They anticipated, adapted, and above all protected. Where Rektarn's forces brought destruction, the humans preserved life. A human squad appeared on the horizon, carrying supplies and weapons scavenged from fallen enemies. They paused, scanning the area, then moved as if invisible threads guided them, rescuing the wounded and neutralizing threats in tandem. Rektarn felt an unfamiliar emotion. Awe. He remembered his own soldiers retreating under the weight of human precision. They were disciplined, powerful, yet inflexible. The humans, by contrast, were a storm of unpredictability, improvisation, and courage. Their advantage was not numbers, not armor, not technology. It was humanity itself, creativity, empathy, and an unyielding will to endure. A flicker of movement caught his eye. One human soldier had climbed a crumbling tower, surveying the battlefield. He raised a small device, and a soft pulse emanated outward, a signal or perhaps a prayer. Rektarn could not decipher it, but its effect was immediate. His soldiers hesitated, uncertainty rippling through their ranks. The humans were not just fighting. They were asserting purpose, bending chaos to their will. Rektarn realized then that the battle was no longer about territory or survival. It was about hope. Where despair had once ruled, the humans imposed possibility. Their courage was contagious, their ingenuity relentless, their faith quiet but profound. And in the midst of the ruin, Rektarn felt something stir within him. A reluctant hope, alien and unwelcome, yet undeniable. The ground shook as orbital fire continued. Yet the humans pressed on, rescuing civilians, disarming hazards, and reclaiming positions that had seemed lost. Rektarn watched, torn between duty and awe, as they moved through fire and ruin like a tide of determination. He remembered his own command decisions, the strategies that had once seemed infallible. And he understood with a clarity that startled him that the humans were rewriting the rules, not through strength alone, but through courage, empathy, and unshakable will. A young human soldier paused in the middle of the street, looking up at the sky. He raised his hand, eyes closing briefly in silent reverence. The gesture was simple yet powerful, a prayer, a vow, a declaration of defiance against the dying world around them. Rektarn's antennae twitched. He did not understand it fully, yet he felt it, a subtle acknowledgement of a force greater than strategy, a quiet presence guiding them through chaos. Somewhere deep in the universe, it seemed, the threads of possibility had aligned in their favor, and as the humans continued to move with purpose, clearing debris, tending the wounded, and striking with calculated precision, Rektarn realized a profound truth. The humans were not merely survivors, they were a reckoning. The smoke over Akron I-4 thickened, a churning cloud of ash, fire, and ruin that seemed almost sentient in its relentless descent. From his vantage atop a half-collapsed tower, Rektarn watched as his remaining elite forces regrouped. Their armor shimmered in the orange haze, each warrior a testament to Akron resilience, but even their confidence was waning. The humans had changed the rules of engagement, and for the first time, the alien commander felt the cold bite of uncertainty. He gestured sharply, directing squads to block the humans' advance. The plan was simple: funnel them into kill zones, obliterate them with concentrated firepower, and reclaim control. Decades of strategy, perfectly honed, should have guaranteed success, but the humans did not respond as expected. From the debris-strewn streets below, the human squads advanced. Not in panic, not in disarray. They moved with calm purpose, exploiting the ruins as cover, their coordination impeccable yet entirely fluid. Rektarn's sensors flared, movement patterns, angles of approach, timing, all anomalous. The humans adapted faster than his algorithms could predict. One human soldier paused at the corner of a crumbling plaza, rifle raised, eyes scanning the ambush site. He glanced at a teammate, signaling silently. In the blink of an eye, another soldier activated a small drone, sending it darting across the battlefield. Explosions erupted in precisely calculated locations, toppling barricades and scattering Akron squads into disarray. Rektarn's antennae twitched in disbelief. How do they anticipate so accurately? The humans were small, fragile compared to his warriors, yet every maneuver carried lethal intent and calculated preservation of their own forces. He barked orders again, the air vibrating with the resonance of his authority, but it fell flat. His soldiers hesitated, uncertainty spreading like a virus. Every engagement ended with the humans exploiting weaknesses that had never existed, creating opportunities where none should have been. A sudden surge of movement caught his eye. A human squad had reached the central plaza, the heart of his defensive network. They moved quickly, disarming improvised traps, clearing collapsed structures, and securing civilians along the way. One soldier, helmetless, raised a small handheld device, sending a pulse of light across the area, stunning and disorienting his elite guard without causing permanent harm. Rektarn felt a chill. The humans weren't merely surviving, They were turning his forces against themselves with ingenuity, precision, and an unshakable will. The battlefield, once under his absolute control, now seemed to bend around the human's presence. He ordered a direct strike, unleashing concentrated plasma fire toward their position. The humans scattered, but not randomly. They ducked behind rubble, rolled across shattered streets, and returned fire with deadly accuracy. Rektarn's elite forces faltered under the barrage, struggling to anticipate moves that defied logic. And then, unexpectedly, one human soldier sprinted into the open, a mere blur against the devastation. He hurled an improvised explosive into a cluster of Akran forces. The detonation was precise, designed not for maximum destruction but for disruption, scattering the enemy and buying his team critical seconds. Rektarn's mind raced. He had encountered many species in his campaigns, many formidable foes, but none like these humans. They did not rely solely on strength nor technology nor brute force. They relied on creativity, audacity, and something deeper, an unshakable belief in their own ability to endure. He remembered a fleeting moment from earlier, a human pausing to pray beneath the ruins. That whisper of faith now seemed more than coincidence. It was a thread woven through their actions, a quiet defiance that guided every move. This is no mere strategy, Rektarn realized. This is something greater. The humans pressed their advantage, moving like shadows through the chaos. They liberated trapped civilians, dismantled enemy fortifications, and redirected his forces' momentum with calculated precision. Every advance was met with adaptive resistance. Every assault countered by ingenuity that left his soldiers in confusion. A young human soldier, barely more than a boy by Terran reckoning, appeared at the edge of a shattered tower. He raised a compact device and a pulse of energy radiated outward, collapsing a bridge used by Rektarn's reinforcements. The command structure of his forces began to crumble. Rektarn's internal systems, those honed for prediction, calculation, and control, struggled to comprehend the battlefield. The humans were not acting randomly. They were not following predictable patterns. They were creating outcomes, shaping chaos itself, bending probability through courage and resolve. For the first time, Rektarn questioned the inevitability of victory. Every calculation he had made, every tactic he had perfected was failing against something intangible yet devastatingly effective. Perhaps victory is not determined by power or numbers, but by will. He watched as the humans carried the wounded from the battlefield, moving them to safety even as they continued to fight. Their actions defied expectation, balancing survival with compassion, strategy with mercy. In that balance, Rektarn sensed the essence of something profoundly human, the ability to endure, adapt, and inspire hope even amid the ruins of despair. And then, a signal, a faint, imperceptible vibration echoed through the city. The humans paused, exchanging subtle gestures, adjusting their movements in perfect unison. It was as if the city itself responded to them, yielding to the rhythm of their will. Rektarn's chest tightened. He could no longer treat this as a simple battle. The humans were not merely soldiers, they were a force of nature, reshaping the fate of a dying world. The tide had turned. His forces, once confident and disciplined, now faltered under the relentless ingenuity and courage of the humans. The city of Akran 4 roared under fire. Orbital bombardments shook the ground, sending clouds of debris and ash into the orange sky. Amid the chaos, Rektarn's elite forces faltered, their carefully orchestrated strategies unraveling under the relentless advance of humans. Each human squad moved like a living current, twisting through the ruins, exploiting weaknesses and striking with precision that bordered on prescience. Rektarn felt a shiver run down his spine. His kind had fought wars across galaxies, crushed civilizations, and endured horrors that would have broken lesser species. Yet here, in the dying heart of his colony, the humans operated beyond expectation, beyond calculation, beyond reason. From the vantage of a collapsed spire, he watched a human soldier maneuver through a battlefield that should have been lethal. Explosions rocked the ground, debris rained down, and his own troops opened fire. Yet the human moved with uncanny awareness, diving behind cover, returning fire and advancing simultaneously. Every decision was a perfect balance of offense and defense, courage and calculation. One of Rektarn's lieutenants shouted orders, pointing to an exposed human squad. A concentrated volley of plasma fire erupted, but the humans anticipated it. They scattered, each movement synchronized yet independent, disappearing into rubble and shadow. Within moments they emerged from unexpected angles, retaliating with accuracy and efficiency that tore through his elite squads. Rek-Tarn felt disbelief twisting into a strange emotion, something like awe. They are not merely fighting. They are rewriting the battle as it unfolds. A sudden motion drew his attention. A small group of humans had reached a collapsed transit hub, where dozens of trapped civilians huddled in fear. Without hesitation, they began clearing debris, improvising support beams and levers to lift massive slabs. Explosions threatened to collapse the structure, but the humans moved as though the chaos obeyed their intent. Rek-Tarn's mind raced. His orders to his soldiers were precise, strategic, and calculated to the smallest fraction of probability. Yet here the humans defied every expectation. They were small, vulnerable, and yet unstoppable. Not through strength alone, not through technology alone, but through will. Through ingenuity, through courage. He realized then that the humans' advantage was not physical. It was moral, psychological, almost metaphysical. Each act of bravery inspired another. Each calculated risk created momentum that rippled across the battlefield. His soldiers hesitated, their confidence faltering as the humans moved with relentless purpose. A human squad advanced into a heavily fortified plaza, blocked by barricades and mines. One soldier detached a small drone, guiding it to detonate key obstacles. Another improvised a pulley system, swinging a makeshift battering ram into the barricade. The explosion was controlled, precise, and opened a path that should have been impossible. Rek-Tarn's mind struggled to reconcile the impossible. They are shaping reality itself. He had trained for decades to anticipate threats, yet the humans' actions were unpredictable, adaptive, and terrifyingly effective. Each victory, no matter how small, seemed to feed the next, a cascade of ingenuity and courage that carried them forward. Then, in the heart of the plaza, a human soldier paused, scanning the sky. He whispered something, a prayer, a vow, or perhaps both. The gesture was small, almost imperceptible, but Rek-Tarn felt it. It was as though the universe itself acknowledged the courage of these fragile beings, bending probability in their favor. Akron squads launched a counterattack, pouring fire into the advancing humans. Yet every assault was met with adaptive resistance. Soldiers dived into rubble, improvised cover, and returned fire with deadly efficiency. Another squad rigged a scavenge drone with a plasma disruptor, sending it into the heart of the enemy formation. Rek-Tarn's elite forces reeled, disoriented, and began retreating under pressure they could not predict. He felt a subtle, alien version of fear. Not fear for his life, but fear of inevitability. The dawning realization that the humans were not just surviving, they were winning. A young human soldier emerged from the smoke, rifle raised, eyes scanning for the next threat. He paused for a moment, kneeling beside a wounded alien civilian, offering water and assistance even as firestorm raged around him. Another soldier followed suit, securing the area and returning fire simultaneously. The juxtaposition of mercy and lethal efficiency left Rek-Tarn speechless. He remembered the whispers he had dismissed, the intelligence reports labeling humans as reckless, chaotic, unpredictable. He now understood they were neither reckless nor chaotic. They were adaptable, creative, relentless, and their faith, however subtle, however quiet, was a force that guided them through destruction with precision that his kind could not emulate. Rek-Tarn's chest constricted. His plans, his calculations, his strategies, all were unraveling. Yet amidst the fear, he felt a strange pulse of recognition. The humans were not invincible, but their audacity, their ingenuity, and their unshakable will made them seem so. He surveyed the battlefield again. Fires consumed the city like rivers of molten light. Debris littered every street. Yet through the chaos, humans moved with rhythm, precision, and purpose. They were small, fragile, yet unstoppable, not through brute force, but through courage, intelligence, and the quiet defiance of hope itself. And then, a human soldier, helmet glinting in the firelight, raised his hands skyward and whispered a prayer so quiet it seemed to settle over the battlefield like a protective veil. Rek-Tarn felt it, not the words, but the intent. The belief. The defiance. The tide had turned. Not through overwhelming firepower, not through numerical superiority, but through human will, ingenuity, and courage. Rektarn moved through the shattered remnants of the Grand Plaza, each step cautious, deliberate. Smoke and fire painted the ruins in jagged shadows, and every building bore the scars of orbital bombardment and human ingenuity alike. His elite forces were scattered, shaken, and demoralized, their confidence eroded by encounters that defied prediction. He had led countless battles, yet nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. At the center of the chaos, a small group of humans had made a forward base amidst the ruins. A cluster of debris reinforced with scavenged metal, barricades rigged with improvised explosives, and a compact communication array that hummed with quiet precision. From this vantage, they coordinated the battlefield, directing squads, rescuing civilians, and striking with timing that defied logic. Rektarn's chest constricted. He had faced overwhelming odds before, yet here he was, outmaneuvered not by numbers or technology, but by audacity, creativity, and the unshakable will of creatures far smaller and weaker than himself. One human soldier emerged from the smoke, scanning the ruins with a calm precision that unsettled him. He adjusted his rifle, paused, and gave a subtle hand signal to his squad. Within moments, a coordinated volley of fire neutralized a group of his approaching elite soldiers, leaving them disoriented and faltering. Rektarn's mind raced. He had trained his entire life to anticipate threats, yet the humans were always one step ahead, not through foresight alone, but through adaptability, improvisation, and relentless courage. Every move they made seemed guided by something beyond calculation, something almost divine. He clenched his claws, scales bristling with tension. He could still order a counterattack, still unleash the concentrated power of his remaining forces. Yet each calculation now carried uncertainty, and with every passing moment his soldiers' hesitation grew. Through the smoke, he saw another human squad navigating a collapsed thoroughfare. They moved with grace and precision, clearing rubble, tending to wounded civilians, and neutralizing threats as they advanced. One soldier paused briefly, looking skyward. He whispered a word, prayer, hope, or defiance, then returned to the task at hand with unwavering focus. Rektarn felt a shiver of something he could not name. Perhaps it was awe, perhaps fear, perhaps a combination of both. The humans fought not only with weapons, but with intention, ingenuity, and empathy. They were rewriting the rules of war, bending chaos to their will, and inspiring hope amidst the ruins. He realized the truth with a clarity that startled him. He could not defeat these humans through conventional means. Their strength lay not in armor or numbers, but in creativity, courage, and the unshakable belief in survival. Each act of defiance fueled the next, a cascade of ingenuity and determination that reshaped the battlefield. Rektarn turned, surveying the remnants of his command. His soldiers were scattered, their morale eroded, their confidence shaken. And yet they were still capable, still dangerous, but only if he could find a way to anticipate the human's next move. Then, from the center of the forward human position, a figure emerged. A leader. Helmetless, carrying only a rifle and a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate calm, the human scanned the battlefield. He raised a hand, signaling for a pause, and the battlefield seemed to respond. Humans moved into position with deliberate care, tending to the wounded, securing civilians, and preparing for the next phase of the assault. Rektarn's antennae twitched. He had faced many leaders, but none like this. The human exuded authority not through fear or aggression, but through quiet assurance, empathy, and the unshakable will to endure. Each soldier followed without hesitation, guided by trust and determination. For the first time, Rektarn questioned the inevitability of victory. His strategies, his calculations, his experience, they all faltered against a force he could not predict, a force that combined courage, ingenuity, and empathy in ways his kind could scarcely comprehend. He raised his voice, issuing commands to regroup, to counterattack, to reclaim control. Yet his orders were met with hesitation, confusion, and faltering execution. The humans, small and seemingly fragile, moved as if guided by an unseen hand, neutralizing threats, rescuing the wounded, and advancing with terrifying precision. Rektarn felt something alien within him, admiration, perhaps, or fear, or the faintest glimmer of hope. These humans were not merely surviving. They were defining what it meant to endure, to resist, to impose meaning upon the chaos around them. He realized then that the battle was no longer about territory, about supremacy, or even survival. It was about defiance, about courage, about the unyielding will to endure in the face of annihilation. The humans embodied this truth in every action, every decision, every moment of calculated risk. Rektarn took a deep breath, antennae quivering. He understood that the story of Akron 4 was no longer his to dictate. The humans had seized it, not through superior firepower, not through numbers but through audacity, ingenuity, and the quiet power of hope. And somewhere, amidst the smoke, fire, and ruin, he felt it, a subtle force guiding them, a presence that transcended logic, calculation, and reason. It was not luck, not chance. It was something greater, something vast, something quietly divine. The heart of Akron 4 burned like a living entity. Each explosion, each collapse, each flare of plasma a pulse in a city that had once thrived in order and structure. Rektarn stood atop a fractured tower, surveying the battlefield with a weight in his chest heavier than any armor could hold. His elite forces were scattered, demoralized, and increasingly hesitant. They had faced countless campaigns, crushed worlds, yet never had the tide shifted so completely under their own eyes. The humans moved like a single organism through the ruins, yet each soldier retained individual initiative. One squad navigated a collapsed transportation hub, clearing debris to rescue trapped civilians while simultaneously disarming minefields. Another squad, barely more than a dozen soldiers, had engaged a platoon of elite Akron warriors and forced them into retreat, with nothing more than calculated precision, ingenuity, and unyielding courage. Rektarn clenched his claws, the decision grinding inside him. To strike now or to hold, to fight conventionally, risking complete annihilation, or to retreat, preserving his forces yet conceding the battlefield. He had never known indecision to feel like this. Never before had survival hinged on something so alien, so human. Then, from the haze, the human commander appeared. Helmetless, rifle in hand, posture calm yet unyielding, he moved toward the center of the ruins with a deliberate rhythm. His soldiers fell in line around him, improvising barricades, securing civilians, and directing fire with near-perfect coordination. The human's gaze lifted to the sky for a moment, lips moving in a silent prayer. The gesture, subtle and unassuming, struck Rektarn like a physical force. The alien commander's sensors picked up a subtle pulse emanating from the human forward position. Not technological, not tactical, but a rhythm, a cadence that seemed to guide every human soldier's action. Rektarn realized with a growing sense of awe and dread that these creatures were not merely executing tactics. They were orchestrating reality through will, courage, and an unshakable faith in survival. He barked orders, his voice cutting through the roar of destruction. Elite squads surged forward, attempting to reclaim the central plaza. Plasma fire lit the smoke-choked streets, yet every assault faltered. Humans adapted, improvised, and countered with an ingenuity that seemed almost preternatural. They used debris, machinery, and even the remnants of orbital strikes to their advantage, turning every hazard into an asset. One human soldier sprinted across open ground carrying a wounded civilian. Plasma bolts cut the air around him, but he moved with fearless determination, weaving through danger with a balance of calculation and courage that defied prediction. Rektarn's soldiers hesitated, uncertain whether to engage a force that seemed to bend reality itself. A sudden, coordinated human maneuver struck the heart of his command. One squad used a series of makeshift explosives to collapse a barricade, while another hacked a dormant drone to detonate among his elite warriors. The result was devastating. His forces were thrown into chaos, morale cracking under the relentless, unpredictable precision of human strategy. Rektarn's chest constricted. He had never encountered an opponent who combined courage, empathy, and creativity so seamlessly. He realized with a jolt that strength alone, armor, numbers, technology, was insufficient. These humans wielded something far more potent, ingenuity and indomitable will. From the ruins, the human commander advanced, eyes fixed on him. A gesture, a simple hand raised in greeting, not threat, reverberated across the battlefield. His soldiers froze, waiting, watching, responding to subtle signals that Rektarn could not decipher. For the first time, he sensed a higher order at work, not through control, but through intention, faith, and courage. Rektarn's antennae twitched as a strange feeling settled within him, a recognition of the human force as something greater than war. It was not conquest, not dominance, not victory alone. It was survival elevated to artistry, a declaration that life, ingenuity, and hope were themselves weapons of unimaginable power. He lowered his energy disruptor, just slightly, as his forces faltered. Hesitation spread like a contagion. The humans were not merely attacking, they were inspiring, demonstrating what defiance could achieve even in the shadow of annihilation. In that moment, the alien commander understood. The battle was lost. Not because his forces were weak, not because the humans were invincible, but because they embodied something his kind could not replicate. Hope, courage, ingenuity. The quiet, unyielding will to endure against impossible odds. A young human soldier, barely more than a boy, knelt beside a wounded Akron civilian. He whispered a prayer, then glanced at Rektarn, eyes calm yet burning with defiance. It was not hatred he felt in that gaze. It was determination, a claim that life itself could prevail, no matter the odds. Rektarn took a deep breath, antennae trembling. The story of Akron 4 was no longer his to dictate. Humans had seized it. Not through superior firepower, not through numbers, but through audacity, ingenuity, and the quiet force of belief. He turned away, signaling the remnants of his forces to retreat, not in shame but in acknowledgement. They had faced something beyond calculation, beyond strategy, a force that combined courage, intellect, and subtle faith in ways his kind could scarcely comprehend. And as he watched the humans consolidate the city, rescuing the wounded, tending to survivors, and preparing for the final stage of their advance, Rektarn understood a truth that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Humanity did not merely survive the impossible, they transformed it. The fires of Akron 4 burned low, casting long shadows over the shattered streets and ruined towers. Smoke lingered heavy with the scent of scorched earth and melted metal. Yet amidst the devastation, the pulse of life, human and alien alike, stirred with quiet intensity. The battlefield had been claimed not by overwhelming firepower, but by courage, ingenuity, and the unyielding will to endure. Rektarn moved slowly through the ruins. His elite forces diminished to mere fragments. He surveyed the aftermath with an alien sense of awe he had never thought possible. Humans moved through the remnants with deliberate care, clearing hazards, tending to the wounded, and organizing what remained into coherent order. Each action carried purpose beyond survival. It carried meaning, a statement that life, ingenuity, and hope could prevail even in the shadow of annihilation. He paused beside a small human squad, watching as a young soldier cradled an injured Akron civilian. The boy's helmet was dented, his uniform scorched, yet his movements were calm and precise. He whispered something quietly, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a vow, but the intent was unmistakable. Rektarn felt it, faint but undeniable, a subtle acknowledgement of a higher order, guiding courage and mercy alike. For the first time in his life, he realized that humanity's strength was not in weapons, technology, or numbers. It was in something intangible, the ability to act with courage, compassion, and ingenuity when all seemed lost, to endure, to inspire, to shape chaos into order. He turned to the horizon where the last flickers of orbital fire faded. The sky, once dominated by destruction, now held the faint glow of a rising sun, a promise of new beginnings. Humans moved like a tide, clearing ruins, rescuing survivors, and consolidating their hard-won territory. Every gesture, every decision radiated purpose. They were not merely victors. They were creators of possibility, architects of hope in a world teetering on the brink of extinction. Rektarn lowered his disruptor, the weight in his claws heavy yet tinged with reverence. He had faced many adversaries, yet none had compelled him to reconsider the nature of power itself. Humans did not impose dominance through fear or firepower. They reshaped the battlefield through courage, ingenuity, and unwavering belief in survival. A human soldier approached him, helmetless, rifle slung across his back. There was no fear, no aggression, only quiet determination. "Commander," the human said, voice steady, "the city is safe. We can end this peacefully now." Rektarn's antennae twitched, His instincts urged caution, but he sensed something he could not name, a truth beyond strategy. The human's words carried conviction, but also a willingness to honor life, to act with mercy even amid devastation. It was a lesson he had never learned from any foe, any campaign. He nodded slowly, signaling the remnants of his forces to stand down. The act was not defeat in his mind, it was acknowledgement. These humans had not merely survived, they had demonstrated a truth that transcended war. That even in the darkest moments, even against overwhelming odds, ingenuity, courage, and the quiet power of hope could alter the course of history. Across the city, humans moved with methodical purpose, stabilizing structures, rescuing survivors, and ensuring the safety of all who remained. They did not celebrate their victory with triumphal cries or dominance. They acted with quiet, disciplined care, as if every life saved was a declaration of principle. Rektarn walked among them, observing, learning, and slowly understanding. Their courage was contagious. Their ingenuity reshaped not just the battlefield, but his perception of what it meant to endure. Every action carried weight, purpose, and meaning. Every life preserved was a testament to the human spirit. In the distance, the young human soldier raised his gaze to the stars, whispering a quiet vow. Not luck. Someone wanted us to survive. The words echoed through the ruins, subtle but profound. Rektarn felt it too, a resonance of something vast beyond comprehension, guiding the actions of those who dared to act with courage and hope. He realized then that the humans' true victory was not merely territorial. It was moral, philosophical, and spiritual. They had proven that even in the darkest moments, even against overwhelming odds, ingenuity, courage, and the quiet power of hope could alter the course of history. The alien commander exhaled, a gesture almost human in its relief and recognition. His species had faced destruction not merely at the hands of weapons, but by the embodiment of hope itself, and in that he understood that humanity was more than soldiers. They were catalysts of change, riders of destiny in the most improbable of circumstances. As the sun broke fully over the horizon, casting golden light across the city, Rektarn observed the humans at work. They were tired, injured, but unbroken. They laughed softly, whispered prayers, and offered hands to the fallen. They were alive, not just in body, but in spirit, and the universe, vast and indifferent, seemed to acknowledge their persistence. He stepped aside as a human squad carried an injured alien civilian past him, their actions guided by care, ingenuity, and quiet defiance. For the first time, Rektarn felt that perhaps even his species could learn, could grow, could honor life in ways they had not before. The battle was over. The humans had endured, and in doing so they had rewritten the story of Akron IV, transforming despair into possibility, chaos into hope, and near certain extinction into survival.